members of our Congress, you will always have within our government those that are above the law. Hey, it's me. You know this whole Watergate scandal, people don't really know what happened because the detail of it, it's not as cool as you may think, and it's not as much something that Richard Nixon did. It's just that he was the establishment, and he was undermined by the establishment, and then he was destroyed by the establishment. And that's what you get. I mean, it could have happened to W. Bush or Reagan or any of these people, because if you're a part of that system, then that system can take you down. It's very easy. Now, I will tell you that I watched All the President's Men, starring Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. And I guess at the time it was a popular movie because Democrats, succeeded in having a popular president resign. And I will tell you that I was bored to tears watching that movie. I mean, these people were making a big story about almost nothing and exaggerating, for example, that they had secret signals, like putting a potted plant outside and secret codes to connect with the secret informant. It was all a pack of lies. Bob Woodward admitted finally that, those things were exaggerations, meaning they were lies. And you can see them now, right? Bob Woodward writes a book of lies to take out Trump, but we're not in the 70s anymore, Bob, and that BS doesn't work anymore. And you see that Bernstein on CNN, he's a complete dumbass. I mean, this guy is like brainless. He's a brainless person and stupid. And so he's not the hero of the story, I can tell you that. Maybe Bob Woodward was a little bit more intelligent, but they're both hacks. They're both liars, and their whole life is based on fraud, in my opinion. And so the movie's worthless, the book is worthless. But if you really look at the Watergate scandal and the resignation of President Nixon, you have to understand that when these two bozos were doing the Washington Post articles, 2 years later, Nixon was reelected in a massive landslide. So it's not like those two idiots had any effect on President Nixon. He was reelected. And if you look at the map of that victory, it's impressive. And I believe that is the map we will see in the future, and perhaps even in 2020. But I will tell you that the Watergate scandal took like 4 years, finally culminating in President Nixon resigning. Now what happened is this. You had Democrats in control of the House, big majority, in control of the Senate, a majority of like 55 senators. And so you had a special prosecutor or a special counsel coming up with a bunch of people that were indicted. But they were not indicted specifically for any crimes that were like the smoking gun. Again, we're talking about lying to the FBI. Sound familiar? And these process crimes. But it was a file, like 7 or 8 people, and that was sent to the House, controlled by Democrats. And in that file, the special counsel included President Nixon as an unindicted co-conspirator, meaning that he's not charged with anything, but maybe he's involved. And that was the whole purpose. And yes, it sounds familiar, right? It's exactly what Robert Mueller's trying to do. And so it comes to a House full of Democrats. Of course, they vote for impeachment, but it has to be confirmed, or the charges have to stick by the Senate voting for it in a majority. And the Senate is also controlled by Democrats. So what ended up happening is that people went up to President Nixon, like the Senate Minority Leader, the Republicans, saying that it looks like they have the votes. Of course, they have the majority, so it's not a surprise. But it means that maybe 5 or 6 Republican senators voted to impeach. So I guess it takes 60 votes, or maybe even 66, 2/3, that enough Republicans join the Democrats. And you can imagine that this is what Democrats were hoping for with Trump, right? That you would have a Jeff Flake and a Corker and those kind of traitors joining Democrats, and then they would get enough to impeach a president. And Richard Nixon saw that, it would either be an impeachment and a disgrace, or he just resigns. So he resigned. But the takeaways are this. The similarity with the Mueller probe, they're trying to reenact Watergate. The whole, special counsel and a lot of people close to Nixon actually lying to the FBI. And, in my opinion, Richard Nixon did nothing wrong. He did nothing wrong. He didn't commit any crimes. But just by the association and the pressure, and then Democrats controlling all of Congress, they made it stick in a way. And again, they used the process to then force the president to resign. And that's what they want to do with Trump. At least that was the plan. And of course, it all backfires. It doesn't work to reenact or reimagine Watergate, because first of all, President Trump is not an establishment guy. So he's not surrounded by a machine of all these little establishment people that prop you up and control your movements and what you say and what you do and do their own stuff. We have President Trump, and Trump is Trump, and he will check everything. He's not like isolated and then other people go rogue. It doesn't happen with Trump. Second of all of these people that were indicted by Robert Mueller, many of them were low-level people in the campaign. You had Manafort, but it's like he was there for a couple of months, and Trump was running the campaign. But Robert Mueller will use that as one of the close aides, and I'm sure that Sloppy Steve is somehow going to be a part of the charges against Trump. And he's trying now also to get Roger Stone to flip, and just to make that file a little bit thicker, that it would make more sense that there's a conspiracy, you see. And another major difference is that, with the Watergate scandal, it's called Watergate because you really did have a break-in, a couple of rogue people, and they were arrested on the spot. They had all this equipment, and it was a real break-in. But that doesn't mean Richard Nixon knew about it, and that is a crime they focused on to enable everything that followed for the next 4 years. It took 4 years. And 2 years after that, Nixon was even re-elected, so it's not like the American people thought he had anything to do with Watergate break-in. And he didn't. But all the rest of it was just like the establishment and the process crimes and the effect of a special counsel. But with Trump, there is no crime. They tried to make one up, Russia collusion. But there is no crime. And even if it were a collusion, that is not a crime. But still, there is no crime. So if you have a bunch of process crimes for lower level people in a campaign, it's not even the presidency. It's nothing. So then they were talking about obstruction of justice, which is a process crime. And that's a departure, I guess, from the Watergate plan or reimagining. That didn't work out, so they quickly tried to find something else and to make Trump one of the people that committed a process crime, be it perjury or obstruction of justice or something like that. And not only is it hard to prove, it is also difficult to prove that this would be a high crime or misdemeanor fitting for impeachment. And of course, they don't have the Senate. They don't have the Senate. In 74, the Democrats really controlled Congress. I mean, it was like all blue almost. But now we have the Senate. And it's going to be a stronger majority after midterms. And even if Dems get the House and, they get the Mueller dossier and have all this, mumbo jumbo and it's a conspiracy and Trump is added in as unindicted, maybe they will try impeachment. But it'll never get to the Senate floor. I mean, Mitch McConnell is going to throw that thing in the garbage. And so that doesn't match. So we're talking about Democrats overreaching and still somehow believing that it's 1974 when they had a lot of power. And it's useless. And Cox, who was the special counsel way back when, was also, 100 times more intelligent than this incompetent buffoon, Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller is known to mess up so many cases going back to the 70s. I mean, we're talking about a guy who is not meant to be a special counsel, to be honest. He doesn't have that skill set. And he can hire all these partisans that he wants, but in fact, it just became a political operation for the Democrats. And Robert Mueller is a Democrat. Don't tell me this guy is a Republican. As I mentioned, he was based mostly in San Francisco and Boston for 80% of his career, and of course in D.C. And you're thinking this guy's going to be like a Republican conservative. No, he's not. He's just a player. Just like James Comey. Ooh, a Republican, he gets fired. Suddenly we see his true liberal pajama boy self. A pathetic pajama boy. And Robert Mueller is the same. I mean, these people are all from the same garbage can from the left. And the establishment and the swamp. Now, I have to remind you of a video that I made last year, and Rush Limbaugh saw it, and I know the president also saw it. It's about the Bush coup. I call it the Bush coup because W. Bush got involved, and therefore his father was also aware of it. This happened in October of 2017. And it's not something that really appeared in the media. I mean, you can find the stories of what happened, but nobody made it a big deal. I guess Matt Drudge didn't put it on the front page, so nobody knows about it. Something like that. What happened is that you had a bunch of senators and the Bush family in the background. And you're talking about John McCain, of course, Jeff Flake, Bob Corker. And, like I said, W. Bush came in. And they were trying to organize a revolt in the Senate. Organizing a sit-down in the Senate where all the senators would basically say, we cannot work with this president, and we won't. And Trump would have to resign. Now, at that time, you had Robert Mueller, you had indictments, and you also had all of these leaks, you had chaos, and you also had this feeling that, Paul Ryan in the House was maybe not sure about Trump, and, they were kind of lackadaisical in the first months, and also Mitch McConnell, leader of the Senate. People thought he's not really on board with Trump, and, they're wishy-washy, and they were. Even I criticized Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan in those months. But in October of 2017, when that happened, turns out the senators happened to be at the White House. And so what Mitch McConnell, Uguay, what he did is amazing. He took all of the senators, except for those scumbags, into a room in the White House. He got President Trump to come in, and they gave him a standing ovation. A standing ovation. And it was almost like they were saying, "Hail Trump," right? And this was like the exact opposite of what the scumbags outside were trying to do and cause a revolt in the Senate. So we're talking about a massive failure of this coup, thanks to Mitch McConnell, Uguay. He really stepped in when it was very necessary, and he's an American hero for that. And so after that, he was amazing on tax cuts. Then all of this here shooting down all these attacks by House Democrats, not even allowing anything to come onto the Senate floor. And of course, you saw what he did with the Kavanaugh confirmation hearing. Uruguay was awesome. And, you know, they call it 2 a.m. in the morning. Can you just imagine that? Mitch McConnell, he's like 100 years old, and at 2 a.m. he's talking to Trump on the phone all the time. It's so cool. And they're working well together. But that is something that didn't receive a lot of fanfare, probably because many people saw it as a massive failure and a coup attempt, and so they don't want to talk about it. But that was almost like they couldn't wait. It was similar to Watergate in that they wanted to speed up the process and take away the whole, you know, impeachment articles and, you know, the special counsel. I mean, they wanted to rush it and just go for the Senate not wanting to cooperate, forcing Trump to resign. It was a massive fail. And so after that, I said, okay, this whole thing's going to fail. They're not going to be able to do it. And as I explained in this video, even the Watergate thing, you know, if Richard Nixon made a couple of different moves, they would have failed. And sometimes I wonder why he didn't. Maybe it's because he really was the establishment. And if you're in the establishment, you can also be killed by the establishment, and there's nothing you can do about it.